Hello everybody. Today we're going to be painting my first oil painting journal entry in my handmade journal. And we're going to be doing a quick study of a George Inness painting of the Delaware Water Gap in Pennsylvania. I think the vantage point is from some of the high rolling hills in western New Jersey, but I don't know that for sure. This painting is going to be created in, at least what I'm going to attempt to do is create it in a tonalist style of painting, where we'll have muted tones, not very many well-defined sharp edges. We're really just trying to create a feeling by manipulating the scene with various tonal qualities. And in this case, it seems like it could be a late day scene where the shadows in the foreground are exaggerated, almost enveloping the entire scene. You'll see that coming up in a little bit. Right now I'm just laying in some of the larger shapes. Initially the sky, and then the large mountains that make up the water gap, and then I'll lay in the foreground after just scraping in some hints of the cloud formations in the sky here. George Inness was a prolific painter, one of my art heroes, if you will. He lived in the 1800s, and his style of painting evolved quite a bit over his lifetime. It appears he was influenced by some of the bigger schools like the Hudson River School, the Barbizon School, and others. And I think he is less well known than he otherwise would be because of the fact that it's hard to put him in one single category. He has some works that are almost realist, almost impressionist, but not quite. And I think most people would categorize him as a tonalist. It's probably the best category for him. And what I've always been drawn to in the George Inness paintings is his masterful way of creating a feeling within the scene. You can tell, that he had exceptional control and ability. He could, if he wanted to, he probably could have been a super realism style painter. But it seems that he would focus on just creating a painting that served as a vehicle for transmitting certain feelings he had about a certain scene. I find that to be a pretty admirable quality in a painter, and he is prolific. Other things that draw me to his work is while he was born in Newburgh, New York, he painted a lot of the areas that I've grown up in and live in, and a lot of his artwork is featured in some of the more prominent galleries in northern New Jersey and the New York metro area, which is where I grew up. And now living out in northeastern Pennsylvania, a lot of the works that he created focus on this area as well. So I've been laying in the foreground after playing around with the sky and the midground area. And that foreground, it looks black, but it's a mixture of black and ultramarine blue. And you can see the blue kind of shine through a little bit better after I wipe some of it away. Which is kind of interesting because generally I'll tend to try to use warmer tones in the foreground. But in this scene, again, I'm basing this upon an actual painting of Inness's, and we're kind of reversing the color temperature theme a little bit, mainly because there's these deep shadows that fall on the foreground, and hoping it'll kind of come together as I work through. You'll also notice I left a lighter spot unpainted toward the middle of the shadow area. That's going to be a little hint of water. And my phone battery died, so missed out on a little bit of the work I did kind of scrubbing some of the excess paint off. You'll also notice that I'm using Q-tips quite a lot. This is a smaller piece. It's on an 11 by 14 inch sheet of paper that's been gessoed. And these Q-tips actually do a good job of helping to get smaller pieces covered with paint, and they also serve as a good vehicle to scrape paint off when a paper towel isn't available, or might be a little less precise than we'd want. These Q-tips allow us to scrape paint off in a way that's very precise and effective. The sky doesn't have a lot of color variance, but with some of the larger cloud masses in this painting, George Inness, he left hints of violet and blue. So the sky is going to be an interesting mix of warmer and cooler colors. Obviously there's a lot of yellow ochre, and we're trying to escape the normal trap of creating a big pile of muddy colors. So I'm weaving my way through the painting, and worked in some cadmium red, which is mixed with a little bit of titanium white and a little bit of yellow. And we're putting these hints of kind of mid-tone highlights on the mountains and the reflection in the water. And you'll also notice that I'm very consistently putting paint on, wiping it off, putting paint on, wiping it off. It's kind of the keystone of this process, for me at least, of creating these tonalist style paintings with the softer edges. And you also notice it's a relatively limited palette. So just using a very little bit of that cadmium red, a little bit of French ultramarine blue. Most of this painting consists of yellow ochre and ivory black and ultramarine blue. And that's another important element of tonalism style painting. Very limited palette. So the painting is kind of coming together, and I like this particular stage of the painting. Part of me thinks maybe I pushed this a little bit too far, or at least if it was my original work, I might think so. But in this case, again, I'm trying to not create an exact copy of the George Inness painting. I'm just exploring ways with which he might have created this painting, and trying to get relatively close, and I think in the end I will. So again, just working my way, weaving through the painting, putting paint down, taking paint off, trying to push the paint around the canvas, in this case the paper, and work toward the effects and the mood of the painting that hopefully mirror the work of the great George Inness. Now I'm putting in what will be a little bit closer to some of the highlights in the sky. I just want to make sure that the sky doesn't get too far out of key relative to the highlight. So that's a mixture of lemon yellow, yellow ochre, and a little bit of titanium white. And I'm going to work some of that highlight into the water, and I'm trying to create some texture in the shadows, adding some cadmium red, wiping it in, wiping it off, trying to create the illusion of fields in the lowlands there and rows of trees, and also trying to make sure that the shadows are shaped appropriately to reflect how the shadows would form in the landscape there and among the reflections in the water as well. From what I understand, later in his life, George Inness settled in Montclair, New Jersey, and this is the time with which he embraced the tonalism style painting in particular a little bit more consistently. As a matter of fact, a lot of his original works can be viewed to this day in the Montclair Art Museum. Montclair is an affluent community in northern New Jersey, just outside of New York City. I believe it's in Essex County. And so we still have access to see some of his original artwork near one of the places he lived throughout his life. So I'm working through reshaping some of the shadows in the sky and constantly moving back and forth, as you'll notice, shaping and reshaping the horizon line and the mountaintops and where they meet the sky, just trying to get an effect where there's no real sharp line, and in some instances on that ridge line it'll become quite difficult to know where the mountain starts and where the sky starts. And I'll keep working back and forth in that manner until I feel like I've gotten the desired look and feel that I want in this particular painting. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm creating this on a handmade oil painting journal. This really is nothing more than a notebook or a sketchbook that has acid-free, heavier paper that's been gessoed. I put 2 layers of gesso after they dried. I started creating this painting, and I'm doing this as a means of controlling costs for some of the more experimental work that I do, particularly inside in the studio, and leaving my panels that I normally use in my stretch canvases for when I'm painting on site. So it's coming together, really just putting in some of the finishing touches, and I'll focus for the most part on getting the highlights in and refining some of the textures in the shadow areas from this point forward. And I would say that if you ever have the opportunity to paint this way, it's fun because it takes a lot of pressure off, knowing that you're not trying to create a photorealistic image. You're not trying to do anything other than just play with colors and light and create a feeling. And you could do this for just about any scene, whether it be landscape, portraiture. So I'm just laying in some lighter, cooler aspects into the shadow, again trying to create the illusion of fields and shifting light patterns within the foreground and the midground, and we'll wrap up pretty quickly here. I'm gonna suggest that maybe check out some of my earlier videos. Right now I have a free giveaway. It's based upon a video that I posted on January 11th where I did 4 plein air studies in my backyard. I'm going to raffle each one of those works off, one each month on the last day of the month, starting in January. And just need folks to subscribe to my YouTube channel and give me a like and or a comment, and we'll include them in the raffle. And again, that's my January 11th video. So just gonna keep scrubbing and making minor adjustments here. And most of the work will be done from this point forward with my palette knife, some of my cotton swabs, and my fingers, just trying to refine the shadow areas and the highlights. And I'll show the final painting, taking off the art tape in just a bit, and post it to my website as well. Yeah, I'd like to ask for you to check it out, particularly on my website, where you can see some additional works that I've created over the past year in particular. Just breaking up some of the edges on the outer parts of those darkest shadow areas in the foreground. And pretty close to wrapping up. Here soon we'll see the finished work. And thank you for watching.